Hi, guys. Welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Another day, another interview, and it's going to be a very cool interview. I have got the King of Calm with me. Now, what a title, what a title. And in all fairness, I could do with a bit of that because my day-to-day started with a short interview, a long interview, then running around doing things for myself, then coming back. So there was no calm there, very little calm there. So it's high time that I've got the King of Calm on my show, Tom Cronin, who can help me a bit, maybe to analyze maybe where I can improve, maybe where you guys can improve, and maybe a few tips and tricks how to actually deal with the underlying problems that so often lead us then to try to escape our reality in drink, in drugs, in pornography, whatever it is that floats your boat. Tom, thank you so much for coming onto my show.
It's great to be here. Well, lovely introduction, and thanks for inviting me along today. It's great.
Oh, hell yes, absolutely. The King of Calm. Man, I mean, the amount of anxiety I had over the years, I don't know, if I could bottle that, I could make quite a nice scent out of that. What about you? Have you been a man who has been plagued in the past with the opposite of cool and calm?
Yeah, absolutely. I had many years of immense anxiety, which eventually morphed into extreme panic attacks. So these waves and waves of incapacitated sort of panic that would sort of have me curled up in a ball and just really, dry retching and having these sort of incredible physiological responses to extreme anxiety. You can have mild anxiety for long periods of time, but I'd get these waves of intense panic. And as these accumulated, it sort of morphed from anxiety into panic and then insomnia. And on top of that was eventually a deep, dark depression because, you're in panic, in anxiety, you're not producing serotonin, you're not producing oxytocin. These are the biochemicals that make us feel positive and loving and calm. And so, my life for quite a long time was quite depleted and deteriorated a lot with anxiety, panic, and depression.
Can you remember when it started?
I think as a child, I remember being prone to fear. So we have what I've learned over time after studying a lot of the science of the body and the mind is that generally by default we have a particular sort of blueprint as a body type. And in Ayurveda, which is the science of the body and the science of life, Ayurveda recognized that there were three distinct body types. There's what we call Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And when they're imbalanced, those different body types, so I'm a Vata, which is a very lean body type, they're prone to being flighty, anxious, and in a state of sort of nervous tension. Then the Pitta body type, which is a very athletic build, so these are normally sports stars, sports people, their physical body is prone to fire and heat. And so when they're imbalanced, they get anger and jealousy and rage. So I never really got anger, jealousy, or rage. It just wasn't one of the things I ever really experienced. But I generally had a lot of anxiety, nervousness, and sort of fear. And then you've got the Kaphic body types, which are the heavy set body types. So you think of Kim Beazley or Roseanne Barr or someone sort of quite jowly and heavy. They're prone to that inertia, depression, and sadness. And so we've got these, you can have variances of each of them, but we do have distinct blueprints. And so as a child, I was very fearful. I used to wake up during the night, not sleep very well, and we lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and I was a bit scared at times. And then as a kid going through school, I was very anxious and concerned about how I was seen and how I was being judged, and speaking up in front of people. I was always afraid of that. So I think we generally have a disposition, and some people it's more extreme than others. And so for me, mine was definitely, and I see it in my children, in my family, my brothers and sisters, my mum and dad, that this proneness to anxiety, and some people will get that in their genetic lines.
Interesting. I'm aware of those categories, and it sounds like oversimplifying, yet there is very much a kernel of truth in there, isn't it? And we need to recognize that these are not absolutes, and right, that we can morph, and that we have got your blueprint, as you call it, as a baseline. But then if you add stress on it, or distress on it, that then again morphs. Each of these can morph and take on other components with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's interesting. When you went to school, how were you at school? Were you not necessarily fitting in? That's not what I'm asking. How were you academically? Did that nervousness translate into you becoming very good at school? Because at least there are rules and there are something you can hold on to.
Yeah, look, I like to be, I like to fit within a parameter, and like to be sort of, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I try very hard at doing things and like to be perceived, and as a child, like to be perceived and received in a particular way. So there was a sense of trying hard to do well. Yeah. I wasn't academically brilliant. I sort of was, top of the sort of middle range, but I do recall I went to an all-boys Catholic school, and I did feel like a bit of a fish out of water. It was a very sort of big football sort of school, and I wasn't a football-y type of guy. I was a little bit more sort of in touch with my emotions. So I did feel a bit fish out of water a lot of times during school, and for that reason, there was a bit of nervousness around that.
But then again, you could say that, is there any one single person in school who feels, oh yeah, I've got my shit together?
No,
so I think we're all variations of a theme there. I have never had a guest who said, oh yeah, I fitted right in school. Because you can't.
It's true.
Okay. But then again, for some of us, that can become a real trauma in itself, and others sort of, they can shrug it off. How did you go then? I mean, where did you go from school?
Yeah, from school, I was going to do a degree in journalism at university. I went backpacking around the world for a while, took a year off school. And when I came back, I didn't have any money before uni. And so I decided to take a few job offers that were out there. And one of them was on a trading room floor, which is very Wolf of Wall Street sort of style. And before I knew it, I was on a massive trading room floor and making lots of money, 6-figure salary, given a sports car and a corporate Amex card. And I was kind of hook, line and sinker pulled into that lifestyle. It was very exciting, very adventurous, and very, hedonistic. And so the university degree got pushed to the side. And I thought it was only going to be a year or maybe 2 years of being a broker, and then I'd go and do my uni degree. But it ended up being 26 years in that job.
Okay, so high pressure, high adrenaline. At some stage, you're tired, but you want to stay high, so you take something for that. At other times, you can't come down, so you take something for that. What became your favorite poisons? What were you playing with?
Look, a big part of the culture in that finance industry, and if anyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, they'll understand what I'm talking about. It was a very accurate portrayal of sort of my world. It was 1987 that Jordan Belfort started his career, and that was the year I started my career, 1987. He was 22 and I was 19. So it was high adrenaline, as you say. And when we've got a lot of adrenaline and cortisol in our body, we don't have a lot of melatonin, serotonin, and oxytocin because we're in the sympathetic nervous system state. And so my body was very depleted by chemicals that made you feel calm and relaxed and happy and full of love. And that's because you're just on edge all day long, doing these, hundreds of millions of dollars of trades. And not only have you got a job that's quite intense and adrenaline fueled, but then you have a social life around that job that is also adrenaline fueled. And so what was naturally a big part of that culture then was a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs. So particularly, back then, cocaine was a big part of the industry. I don't know about it these days, but it certainly was back then. So that was kind of like the elixir that we were sort of using to certainly some of the groups that I was involved in back then was a big part of our industry then.
Was that Australia? Was that in that setting? I'm
pretty sure it was global, but that was where I was based.
Correct. Obviously, some countries have variations of a theme. They rather prefer one drug over the other, but it's mainly uppers, really. You want to be up there. Wow, this is cool. You want to be high.
Sure.
But your body needs to calm down at some stage. Did you experience burnouts? What happens after a week on cocaine, alcohol, and stress? What happened to you?
Well, unfortunately, my burnout, I didn't get to experience my burnout until quite a long time, because it was an accumulative process.
Right.
What happened was I didn't just sort of crash at the end of the week and then just catch up on sleep. My weekends were catching up with a bunch of other mates and going into the warehouse parties. I was really big on the nightclubs and the warehouse parties and the dance music scene.
Yeah.
So by weekdays, I was in the finance industry and doing things with traders and other brokers, which was a very different type of group of people than my weekend crowd, which was a group of sort of independent indie sort of crowd into the rave culture and the nightclub scene and the dance music scene. So I was spending my weekends with them. So I didn't really get this sort of burnout, crash and burn every week and recuperate from the midweek sort of shenanigans. And it was this cumulative effect of building up of stress and fatigue, overwhelm. And it was many years later that I had a major burnout. So that was a cataclysmic sort of nervous breakdown. And there I couldn't go to work. I was seeing psychiatrists, doctors, put on pharmaceutical drugs. So at the age of 20, I can't remember what year it was in 1996. So it was around the age of 29 that I had a full mental nervous breakdown.
No surprise. That was what, 6 years, 7 years of just madness.
Just madness. Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
And look, the thing is, what we've all got to understand here is that your body is an incredible piece of equipment that has an intelligent design in it. And that intelligent design is like a car. When a car has a problem, it gives you red lights. And the red light on the dashboard is a signal that's letting you know that there's something wrong with the car and you need to have a look under the bonnet. So the body gives you signals all along the way. It doesn't like what you're doing, and it's going to let you know that it doesn't like what you're doing. So I was getting signals all along the way over those years of, colds, flus, viruses, being run down, getting anxiety, getting insomnia. And these are red lights on a dashboard that's letting you know that the body doesn't like that particular protocol. And we should be listening to the red lights, but generally, because we're quite stubborn and we're not adaptable, which is Einstein's definition of, the strongest of the species is the most adaptable, right? And I was not very adaptable. And so because I was just persisting with the same thing and resisting the information flow from my body, eventually what happens is the body doesn't just make that go away. The body just turns up the volume and says, wow, we've got a stubborn one here. We're going to have to let this one know that we don't like what he's doing, and we have to try and find a way to stop it. And if you keep ignoring that, then eventually the body gets and puts you in an unconditional situation. It puts you in a choiceless situation. It's like, it's what we call in engineering terms a bifurcation point, which is breakdown or breakthrough. And we shouldn't have to get to that particular point, but most of the time as a collective species or as an individual, we usually wait until it's bad enough or almost too bad before we finally make a decision to break down or break through.
It's beautifully said, because there's virtually every single guest I've got on my show has come to that point. Or multiple times to that point, because some of us are overachievers. We don't just take one big breakdown and say, okay, I learned from that. No. We want to make sure, so 5 or 6 times the same thing, which is really the definition of insanity. So exactly. So welcome to the club. So then you were 27, 28, and suddenly the lights went on and you were a new and improved version. Yeah.
Not quite.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so.
But it was an interesting process that I went through. I basically couldn't go to work. I was struggling with agoraphobia, depression, insomnia, anxiety, panic attacks. So I had all the boxes ticked. But the doctors had identified that I was having a nervous breakdown. They actually used those words. They sent me to a psychiatrist, and he put me on pharmaceutical drugs. But I felt intuitively that this path that I was on, which was Western medicine, psychiatry, and pharmaceutical drugs, not to dismiss it for anyone who's using that, but for me, intuitively, I felt there must be another option, because I didn't feel like I was getting to the core of the problem. And interestingly, at that time, I came across meditation in a TV show that I was watching. It was about a property developer, and he talked about how we use meditation. And I'd never come across meditation. It wasn't something that was in my life at that point in time. And it was still very much unheard of. This was 1996. But there was like this light bulb moment that went on in my head. And I just felt like there was something here that must be worthy of exploring. And that's when I started to look into meditation. And so interestingly, I learned to meditate, and I did a lot of research. I did a lot of different styles of meditation, but I came across one that was really transformational. And what I found was that the symptoms of anxiety, depression, even the addictions, were a byproduct. They weren't the cause, they were a byproduct of me being in a particular state, which is the sympathetic nervous system state. And what meditation did was it very quickly put me into the parasympathetic nervous system state, like within seconds, minutes. And everything started to change. My whole body reversed all of those anomalies of being in a hyper-stressed situation, a hyper-stressed response.
Yeah.
And I found that very quickly, within weeks, a lot of those anomalies just simply reversed and undid themselves. So the insomnia went away, the anxiety went away, the depression started to lift, the panic attacks went away, the addictions even started to go away, because I was in a cortisol-induced, adrenaline-induced state before. Meditation got me into a much better biochemical balanced state. And because I was in a better biochemical balanced state, the cravings and the addictions naturally started to just melt away, because I didn't have that ache and that yearning to have something fulfill an empty lack that I was experiencing.
When was the first time that you realized that? Because, I mean, this takes time, these realizations, these breakthroughs.
It's less of realization, it's more of an experience. This is what it was for me. So what happened was, the first thing was I went to an introductory talk about the meditation, and the neuroscientist who was teaching the technique, who had a lot of scientific studies validating the power of that technique to reverse the body's hyperstimulated sympathetic nervous system state and put into the parasympathetic. And all of that science was really starting to intellectually, like a jigsaw piece, fall into place. So it made sense on an intellectual level. So I signed up to do the course. But what happened was, within the first week, experientially, I started to notice a lot of what he was talking about intellectually starting to play out experientially in my own body. So the first and foremost one was I had chronic insomnia, and that's simply the body's state of being in sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight, flight, stress response state. So if you've got a marauding tribe or saber-toothed tiger chasing you, your body's not going to produce melatonin because it doesn't want you to fall asleep, because it's dangerous. If you've got a marauding tribe chasing you, you don't want to fall asleep. And so I'm in sympathetic nervous system and having chronic insomnia. Now, insomnia is the byproduct of being in sympathetic nervous system state. It's not the problem, insomnia, that's just the byproduct. And so once I got out of sympathetic, the body started producing melatonin. And this happens very quickly when we start meditating. I was actually teaching a group of people, 100 people in a large conference a couple of days ago. And I said to the audience, I said, I'm going to put you all into a meditation experience. And about 50% of you, about 50 of you in this room will start getting noddies and falling asleep within 4 minutes of me teaching you to meditate. And they're all scoffing and laughing, going as if there's no way. But they did, and that's because their body started to produce the melatonin and correct the imbalance that was in the body. And so for me, falling asleep in that first week was unbelievable. And so that was one of the earliest stages of things starting to experientially change.
Wow. And that is such a gift. I mean, for crying out loud, I must say I'm a high adrenaline kind of dude, and the sleep is something. I can go off to sleep, but then wake up and it's broken sleep, and there's constantly this fight and flight going on in me. Now, there are good reasons why it happens in me. There is some PTSD going on, and there is some, not so nice things going on. At the same token, it's all this balance. It is, if I let the craziness take hold and not work on it, well, I work on a relapse. Or you can work on your recovery, and you can actually do exactly follow steps that you are nowadays, that you have found out the hard way, that you're nowadays teaching others to do. So sleep was the first breakthrough for you, and your body would have had so many warning symptoms that you were in trouble. Typically the headaches, the stiff neck, pain here and there and everywhere, often tummy upset, frequent infections. So how did that all go when you started meditating?
Yeah, what starts to happen is the intelligence within the body starts to have the potential and the possibility now to do what it does really well. The body actually is designed to optimize and restore balance. The challenge is when the only way it can do that is if there's enough orderliness and calmness in the body to do that. So we use this analogy of the Third Law of Thermodynamics that states that as the excitation occurs, order increases, and as excitation occurs, disorder increases. And they look at boiling water as an example, that as there's more excitation, there's more disorder in the system. And we see this in many different types of systems. We can take a stadium of, say, 80,000 people that are watching a football game. And at the end of the game, if they're very calm and they just exit that stadium very easily within 10 minutes, okay? You can empty a stadium quite quickly. If everyone's just very calm, gets out of their chairs, gets in single file and walks out the exit gate. But if there's a bomb or a gunshot or a fire or something, and all of a sudden they're overexcited and they're overstimulated and they're rushing around like crazy, we know that there becomes mayhem and disorder, and they stampedes and people can die and all sorts of things. And the same thing happens with our body. If our body is got way too much hyperstimulation, which is what's happening in the world, then the system, which can run extremely orderly and extremely optimally, given the optimal state for it to actually do that in, which is calmness. And the problem is with our world, increasingly so, is we're seeing hyperstimulation happening in our mental, physical, and emotional states. And what this is leading to is greater and greater levels of imbalance. And we've got Dr. Bruce Lipton from Stanford University Medical School. He says that 95% of all sickness, and that would include addiction, is a result of stress. And so if we eliminate that stress response that's happening in the body, if we put the body into that calm state, what we find is an orderliness starts to take over, and a balance and optimization start to get enacted. And so for me, this is what happened. The things just simply started to not be there. The addiction started to just simply go away. The insomnia started to not be there. The anxiety started to not be there. And what prevails when you take those stresses out is your truth, your true essence. And the true essence of every human being, when we take all those anomalies out of the system, is that there's a lovingness, there's a gentleness, there's a kindness, there's a happiness, there's a calmness. And this is the very essence of who we are, without the distortions of we call them samskaras, these scars from life experiences that accumulate in us and cause these distortions.
Sorry. You also could, of course, say that purely on a physiological basis, your body starts healing when it gets into a parasympathetic state. So here you are being completely inflammatory, being completely run ragged, and everything in your body hurts because there's inflammation everywhere as a result of your lifestyle, of what you're doing and how you're coping with it, because the alcohol or the cocaine or the drugs, they do themselves harm in addition to the imbalance that you've got there already. So, and by now suddenly introducing initially maybe a few minutes and then a few hours of tranquility, of true serenity, of true peace, of true parasympathetic state, that is where suddenly the body says, okay, now I can focus actually on, okay, there is quite a lot of inflammation going on in the gut. Let's deal with that first. And then how about this old shoulder injury? Let's get rid of that. And so on and so on. And it sounds stupid, but you're right. That is where the intelligence in our body actually starts working. And it's spooky. It is actually what can occur seems nearly supernatural. It seems like this is weird. It must be a god who does that, or it must be whatever belief systems we put on it. Yet in fact, it is the sheer power of us restoring balance. And I think that is where really meditation comes into its own, isn't it? It is.
Well, I felt compelled to walk away from a nearly 7-figure salary to teach meditation, which was not financially a great career move at the time. It's something with my wife was like, "You're what?" So we had to sell our house and things. But I was so passionate about what I saw happen in me, and what I started to see happen in other people that were following the same path, where we never had the potential, really up until just the 70s and 80s and 90s, in the history of humankind, really, for people to embrace meditation in their daily lives as householders. It was normally the domains of ashrams and monasteries and up in Tibet and in India. So all of a sudden we saw this whole new phenomenon starting to emerge, and more so even today, where we've got this exponential level of stress increasing in our world, but we've also got this really exciting integration of these practices that have been around for thousands of years that are now starting to be embraced and adopted. And the phenomenon of what this technique can do for removing so many ailments and anomalies, really the technique's just helping put the body in a state that allows the body to do what it does. And that's what I was blown away by. It's like, oh my goodness, you can't be serious. Like, so many of our Western world treatment of these anomalies is either one of two things. One is currently self-medication, which is scrolling through Instagram, or using drugs, or using porn, or using alcohol, or using caffeine or sugar or food, whatever it is that's trying to distract or numb us from a discomfort that we're currently experiencing. And if we're not self-medicating, then we're medicating, which is, let's just put a tablet down their throat and hopefully that this will make the problem go away. But once we realize that deep rest and deep calm and deep stillness and deep meditation can do all of that for you without the side effects, without all the anomalies that come with trying to treat the symptom, then we have a very different world. And that's why I made the film The Portal and the book The Portal, to showcase through 6 real life stories that no matter what someone's background, no matter what someone's crisis, no matter how bad your life has been, we have the ability to break through, alchemize, and live in an optimal way. And no one's excluded from that capability.
That's so important, isn't it? It is a choice that we have. It is a privilege for us. We have the privilege to choose which path we want to go. Having said that, typically we don't know that we're in trouble unless someone holds the mirror in front of your face. And the amount of patients that come through my system as an anesthetist which have, for example, chronic pelvic pain. I work with a lovely gynecologist. So we look into the tummies of many women where we think, well, is there maybe something going on there? And often enough, we find sweet nothing in there. And that's really good. So there's no cancer. There is no chronic nastiness going on. But for the women, the problem remains. There is still the problem there. So what do you do? And that is, I think, I see that in daily life often, that there are problems where we cannot put our fingers on it as doctors. And then in such a case, to be reassured that it's not cancer, but now what? That is, I think, the key thing. And therefore, that is then where the real journey begins, the real journey of getting to know your body, listening to your body. What are actually the messages that it is saying to us? And then learning more. Because your journey was a journey of not just self-discovery, but discovery. You learned more about the intricacies of the nutrition. What do various foods do to your body? What does hydration do to your body? What does silence do? What does exercise do? All those kind of things. You are becoming a scholar of your own body, so to speak. And
that's so beautifully put.
What a beautiful journey it is. And we often get sidetracked in our journeys. My journey is meandering as hell. So it's all over the show. And you think you're going there and you find yourself over there. It is what it is. But I'm learning every day more about me. And I'm honored to have guests like you. I'm humbled to have guests like you who actually hold a mirror in front of my face to actually say, hey, look, are you really doing what you maybe should be doing? Tom, I think I'm the typical guy, oh God, there are so many reasons why maybe I'm not sleeping so well. So I would be such an easy target for you to take me apart. So maybe let's do not go there. Let's do not use the obvious guy, but maybe do a bit more subtle examples of people who are coming to you who think, look, I'm doing it all right and I've got healthy nutrition and I'm still not achieving the serenity, the tranquility. How do you go about that? What can you give us some examples?
You know, we know of the idea of enlightenment. We know that this exists. We know that people experience it. They're in a state of absolute empowerment, sovereignty, deep bliss, deep lovingness. We might not know of those people in our lives personally, but we know that that example exists in the world. And we have to look at then, okay, well, what's the difference between someone who's enlightened and someone that's not? And really it comes down to what I call the 10,000 Hours by Malcolm Gladwell. And I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And it's a profound book that looked at people that were outliers in our society that excelled in certain areas, like let's just say David Beckham at soccer, or Tiger Woods at golf, or Yo-Yo Ma at the cello, or someone else at science. And what they found was that these people were allocating a disproportionately large amount of time to be better at that particular niche than someone else. And they might have an inherent capability or skill set at it, but it was the fact that they were allocating larger amounts of time to that particular area to be better at it. And we find this time and time again. And, you know, classic example, David Beckham, you know, people would go to soccer training, they'd finish soccer training after 2 hours, and he'd stay back for an extra hour every night trying to kick that ball in that beautiful curve so he could perfect that sideline kick. And he obviously got better and better at it. And so the same thing goes with our level of blissful awareness and enlightenment, or let's just say a deep calm and deep happiness, is that we all have within each moment a certain series of preferences that we can make. I can make a preference to stay on my phone till midnight scrolling through Instagram, or I can read a book at 9 o'clock and go to bed at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. True. I can wake up in the morning and I can have 3 cups of coffee, read the news, look at my Facebook, and then go to work. Or I can wake up in the morning, do some yoga, meditate, do some journaling, and then have a green smoothie and some dairy-free yogurt for breakfast. You know, so each moment is a series of preferences that are going to lead our life to a better experience or a worse experience, and we get to choose. And so for me, my life on a weekly basis, I meditate twice a day, I journal, I read positive books, I go to the gym 3 times a week, I sauna 3 times a week, I do yoga 3 times a week, I spend time with my family, I spend time in nature. And this is just a series of value propositions in each moment where I get to assess how is this going to improve my life, and how sovereign am I in making these decisions to being on track to having a more empowered, more conscious, more enlivened and healthy existence.
It's just beautiful. And that, the principle of the 5-minute gardener, if you were to spend every day 5 minutes in your garden, never more, never less, but consistently 5 minutes, your garden after a month would look very different. After 3 months, 6 months, it would be an oasis of sorts.
And so I just wanted to go back and just touch on something you referenced before, which is really poignant. And this is, you know, how, you know, quite often some of the challenges with people resolving their problems and moving forward is that they don't know that they actually have a problem. You know, for me, I had normalized to this idea that I was sick, tired, overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, and I hadn't realized that there was a problem. I kind of had just normalized to living that way, thinking that this was just a normal way of living. So the first part in the problem is that people quite often don't know that there's a problem. They don't know that there's another alternative to the current paradigm that they're living by. And secondly, when they do work out that there's a problem, then quite often a lot of people don't know alternatives. You know, they just have a doctor and a psychologist and a pharmaceutical company that says this is the only path. And so if you don't know that there's other alternatives, then we just go down whatever path we know. And so this is also a bit of a dilemma, which is what inspires me to get my message out to the world, and why I'm even here with you now, is to let people know that there's a myriad of different ways, and it has to be a very holistic approach to health and wellness. And this is why I have a multitude of different things that are tools in my toolkit to make a great life. Just as a gardener will have multiple tools to make his garden really good. And so it's not just having a shovel. He needs, you know, fertilizer, and he needs good soil, and he needs good moisture, and he needs, to have a hoe and to weed his. And so there's so many different things that I bring together to make an optimal existence. And I think that that's something that we need to start talking a lot more about in our world, is what are the best ways to overcome so many of these problems that we're facing.
So true. It's nearly, you want to go back to school and actually make that a mandatory subject. Of today, we're going to learn about meditation, and next week we do breathing exercises. Next week we do that. Actually, introduce kids from a much younger age, not us being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff after people had their burnouts, after people had their far too long struggles with addiction and mental health problems. And health problems, we should say health problems. Mental health is only a part of the story. How many times the chronic pelvic pain we mentioned earlier, there are a number of other so-called functional things, the migraines, the chronic headaches, things like that. There's so many things out there that are destroying people's lives. And surprise, surprise, often those medications can be of help, but don't necessarily take away everything. And not surprising, it is, you expect this magic, beautiful little pill that does undo 30 years of your drinking and of your trauma and of your childhood problems. Yeah, I don't think so. When you actually look at it from that angle, then okay, yet we are expecting it. We're expecting that instant gratification, and that is such a fallacy. But what you are really saying is there is a bank account that you're paying into every day, and the more you pay in, the more dividends you get out, and that's the compound interest of you doing all those things in a day results in you actually sleeping, results in you actually being the king of calm. the serenity maker, or no, king of calm. That's a much nicer. I'll give you that. So no, wow. So how long have you been on this journey now?
Well, I started, had that nervous breakdown and everything in my world collapsed 26 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I continued on in finance for quite a long time, just meditating and eating well and drinking well and living a healthy life. And then eventually it became very apparent that I wanted to get this message out to the world. So I left my job in finance and then went into teaching meditation, and that sort of evolved and grew. So it sort of ventured into making a film and having 6 books published, working with a lot of the top companies like Amazon and Coca-Cola and Qantas to help them and their staff reduce stress, and now doing a lot of coaching with conscious leaders to help them get their message out to the world and try and impact the world and scale our message out to the world in a bigger way.
Is your message being taken up, or is it maybe more a feel-good thing that some leaders implement in their workplace to say, look, we are doing something for the staff's satisfaction? Is there really a buy-in in the large companies?
Look, it's a really good question. And, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so we introduce programs, we introduce strategies and systems, and just not everyone's ready for it. And that's something we have to come to terms with. I had friends that knew I wasn't in a very good space for a long time that kept suggesting that maybe I should do some yoga and meditate. And I was like completely, rejective of those suggestions. I just had no interest in them. And so sometimes we need to hear things 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And so I'm very patient with that. And as you would want to be as a meditation teacher, and just knowing that, just do your best, let the world know, let people know there's other options. And then some people will choose it and some people won't, and that's okay as well.
Absolutely. No, I like it, the way you're discussing that. But I think there it is people who think, well, it's actually really mumbo jumbo, etc. There was a beautiful study not too long ago, within the last 5 years, where they looked at a large company and looked at people with headaches, chronic migraines, and looked at the burden onto the company to see, well, how many days were off sick, how much productivity was lost, etc. And then they implemented a welfare or wellness scheme, shall I say. And it was basically hydration, it was healthy nutrition, it was mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises, all those kind of things. And then they ran that for a short period of time, and then they tried, or I think 3 months. Then they left, but did a follow-up a year later. And it turns out that actually by implementing such a simple wellness scheme, they on average gained 10 days per migraine sufferer per year of productivity. As our number one. And when you looked at those things that were the easiest to keep up and to maintain, it was actually hydration and a healthy amount of exercise. And we're not going nuts here, go to the gym every other hour. No, we're talking implementing exercise as part of your daily living. Maybe choose to walk the stairs rather than taking the lift, those kind of things. It was simple things that were being implemented. Yet, by doing so on a consistent basis, there were 10 days that for the company that they had their workers at the workplace and clearly a far better satisfaction amongst the workers who were otherwise, full of stress and suffering. What a nice success story. And that was a lovely study. And it just shows that if we actually put our money where our mouth is and actually invest literally in such schemes, how would this world be at the end of the day? And it would be amazing, would be my educated guess. Therefore, I love the journey that you are on of being this spokesperson for calmness, this person who goes out there and facilitates others experiencing the calmness, the serenity. And that is a magic place to be. The problem is the moment you leave, if they then don't take up this kind of momentum and let it seep away, that's the problem. It's the same with me. I find myself, I've worked again like stupid over the last month. Quickly, the swimming fell by the wayside. Healthy eating fell by the wayside. Not all the time. Often I could do things, but there were more days creeping in when a muffin just looked too good to say no. And it's those kind of things. And I feel I'm getting ratty. My mood is not as nice as it could be. It is what it is. So, but then again, when you are flying from here to overseas, even from here to Sydney, 95% of the time, the plane will be off course. So what? That's free correct. Okay, you had a muffin, who cares? Then have a smoothie tonight and maybe do some intermittent fasting tomorrow. So who cares? Okay, you can't go to the gym now. Well, fine. Just get up, actually walk down the steps, maybe twice, and come back up. And that's it. You have done some exercise. You have got the privilege to choose right now what you do. And I commend you guys out there, because right now you're listening to Tom Cronin and me just bantering around and talking about those actually so simple steps. If we can just maybe do something on a regular basis. I mean, do you advise your clients to set alarms, to actually think about hydration? How do you implement good habits? Because that's really what we're talking about when we are talking about a fundamental transformation of life. It's implementing good habits that sooner or later outweigh everything negative that we have done or that we might be still doing.
Yeah, look, I do recommend them compartmentalizing their week into sections each day. And even my one-on-one clients get a success planner, which is my daily journaling book. And every day I set up their routine for their day. And at the end of the day, they tick off the boxes. Did I drink? There's a little section in each page of that book. Did I drink 2 liters of water? Did I exercise? Did I read? Did I meditate? Did I do some stretching? And it's not like we need to do them every day, but if we, the analogy I like to use is if you take a twig, you can snap it quite easily. And just one twig on its own is a little bit fragile. If you've got one thing to use to try and make your life better, let's just say, I'm going to live a fairly unhealthy life, but drink 2 liters of water a day. That one thing alone probably isn't enough, even though it's still quite good. But if you take 2 or 3 twigs, it's a little bit harder to break. They're a little bit more stable and a little bit more strong. So now I've got drinking 2 liters of water a day, doing some stretching, doing some journaling, and then you start adding more layers to your health and wellness regime. And you'll find that I really like that analogy you had before of investing. You're putting money in the bank and you're investing for the long term. Our society and our system that we're currently operating within is set up for immediate gratification. And it's also set up for promoting an unhealthy and unhappy society. So our economic model is built on the idea that it thrives more successfully if we're unhealthy and unhappy, because then we want more, we spend more, and we depend upon a system more. But if we take our happiness and our health into our own hands and we become sovereign in it, what happens is that economic model has to change quite dramatically, because what we're depending upon is things to make us happy and make us healthy. But it's actually quite simple to be happy and healthy without the dependency on that system. And so then we start to have a very, very different operating system.
Very intriguing. Very intriguing. I actually like the way that you're saying that. I'm not sure that people actually say that consciously out there, but of course it makes sense. You can make more money out of sickness than you can make out of wellness. Well, I think nowadays the balance is so good out there because there's so much money being made out of wellness programs.
True.
And some of them very deservedly, because some of them are worth their weight in gold, and some of them are nothing than shenanigans and rubbish packaged in a magic green powder. That if you drink that 3 times daily, then your life will be so much better. Yeah, exactly. As you said, instant gratification is unfortunately not working when it comes to mental wellness, isn't it?
I think we just got to ask if we're going to have, let's just say, $1 billion being spent on sick people, or $1 billion of sick people spending money on being sick, and $1 billion of money being spent on being healthy. You definitely want to choose the $1 billion of people being sustainably healthy, and which leads to greater happiness as well. So I agree with you that there's a big industry in both, but I think the one that leads to a healthier, happier society is much better option.
Should you? No, there's no 2 ways around it. Tom, you're an amazing man. I absolutely love the way you have come to the truth of it. But it's interesting because it is a 25-year journey for you. There you go. For me, it was a 25-year journey in alcohol, and now an 8-year journey. So I'm a few years behind you, certainly in my mental skill set. So I'm only just touching upon the meditation. I'm only just going there, and it is. I'm excited about it because I sense that this is another string to my bow, another, as you say, the twig that gives you more stability. I love that. So we shall see. We shall see. It is. I'm very grateful that you came today onto my show, because you reminded me on stepping back and looking at a bigger picture, and that the bigger picture is so important because it allows me now to focus more on maybe those things that I haven't done so well. And it is what it is. We are all human beings. Everything in moderation, including moderation. So let's make this world a better place. And if people are, if your story rings a bell with them, if they want to find you, where can they go?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd love to offer everyone a free copy of my book, which is a book on overcoming anxiety and depression, addictions. Will just really be a series of those little twigs added together to some steps that are allowing people some roadmaps and some guidelines as to what they can maybe do to make their life better. So it's called Faster, Deeper, Calm, and we'll just have a link in the show notes. I'll give you that link, and they can just click on that link, and then they can just get that free book. Ultimately, they can go and find me at tomcronin.com or Instagram Tom Cronin as well. Very simple.
Brilliant. And I think it's a beautiful investment if you actually look at it from that angle. We are investing so much. We are thinking we're doing ourselves something good, which often enough is a fallacy, and often enough those things that are doing us good, like the cheesecake or the lovely bottle of wine because I've deserved it, or they all come with a heavy price tag immediately and in the long run, regrettably. And if we could just maybe take the same money and invest it into maybe half an hour a call with you, or maybe a series of interventions with you or a program with you. I think these kind of things are amazing. And provided you are actually getting involved and you're willing to change, then this is amazing. If you only say, well, with a course and with a program, it's not as easy. But if you're just buying just another self-help book that you then don't read, or if you read it, that you never will implement even the smallest bit of it, then, well, surprise, surprise, your life will not change. But so no. True. Tom, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. Thank you so much for opening my eyes again to the need to think wider. And I tend to get stuck in certain niches where I say, oh, I really need to do more sport. And then I do more sport, and it's sort of up and down. And I need to eat better. And I do eat better. Okay, up and down. But it's so rare that I step back and actually have an overarching look and see what else is going on. Where am I actually getting trapped again in a rat race that I so hard try to avoid, but it sneaks up on you? And my suspicion is, yes, I have in recent times. So your interview could have not come at a better time. For that, I'm very grateful.
Wonderful to hear.
Tom, thank you so much for coming on to my show. And you guys out there, look after yourself and stop for a moment and think, are you really the person who you want to be? And if not, and my educated guess is the reason that you're watching this show or listening to this podcast is maybe that you're still searching, then maybe there's some beautiful work waiting for you. Don't look at it as a chore. Look at it as the privilege to change, as the opportunity to grow into a better human being. And this is fantastic. I wouldn't have it any other way. So I love myself being perfectly imperfect because, yeah, at least I can grow. I'm nowhere close to even coming to good levels, leave alone to perfection. So I'm striving, and Tom Cronin, good man to have by your side, because he has been striving a little bit longer than me. So here I am talking to the master. So Tom, thank you so much for coming onto my show.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me along today.
You are there. Look after yourself and live with passion. Bye.